So U.S. job growth came in today stronger than expected in October, despite the Federal Reserve interest rate increases aimed at slowing what is still a relatively strong labor market. Non-farm payrolls grew to 61,000 for the month, while the unemployment rate moved higher to 3.7%. The Labour Department reported this today. Our ICE News correspondent Laurie Laird joins me now from London to wrap up an interesting but very busy week. Hey there, Laurie. Good evening. Let's get together to the data. I know it's been a very busy week with the Fed and the economic data. Before we get to the data, why is this number so important when you're trying to gauge the temperature of the economy?
It's always worth pointing this out because honestly, in the week that we get a U.S. non-farm payroll report, often trading is very subdued. Nobody wants to really blotch their copybook ahead of this data, which can really move the markets. And there are two reasons why this data set is pretty important. One is it is the first set of official data that we get in a month. We get it just a couple of the first Friday after the end of the previous month. So it's a very early look at what happened in the previous month. The other thing that makes it so important is that it's such a sort of a vital bit of what we want our economy to do, right? We want our economy to create jobs, and we want the economy to create jobs that pay us a decent wage. So this is a measure of whether the economy is working for people like you and me, working for everybody in an economy. It is a very visceral measure of what's happening.
But what do you make of the numbers yourself? You've threw it together, I'm sure. Tell me.
Let's start. I mean, this is a really interesting number. If you want to see strength in this number, it's there. If you want to see weakness starting to creep into the labor market, you can find that too. Let's look at the headline first, though. As you mentioned, job creation, 261,000. Better than expected. It is below the average throughout the year of just over 400,000 jobs a month. But remember, when we started this year, we were still in a bit of a COVID recovery phase. Job growth was much stronger than we tend to see on average. To see more than 250,000 jobs, more than 250,000 jobs being made at this point in the recovery in the U.S. is very mature. The fact that we are still seeing this many jobs created does tend to show that the job market is hot, as Jerome Powell, the head of the Fed, said a couple of days ago. Add to that average hourly earnings aren't coming down. We came down a little bit to an annual rate of 4.7%. We had been at 5% in September, but this is still much, much higher than the Fed wants to see. The Fed thinks that wage growth at about 3% is commensurate with their inflation target of 2%. So a lot of heat there if you want to look at it that way.
Well, some analysts are pointing to an early signs of an economic weakening. How do you respond?
Yeah, and look, it really sounds like I'm sitting on both sides of the fence here, but there were some interesting bits to this data. Now, I mentioned that employment was up 261,000. That is employment that's measured by what is called the corporate survey, and it's felt to be a much more accurate sense of how many jobs were created. And what happens is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they go out and they ask companies, how many jobs did you add? How many did you cut? They come up with a net number. Now, there's another survey called the Household Survey, and that is thought to be much less reliable. And it depends on people knocking on doors saying, hello, how are you? I'm a statistician. I need to know how many people are in this household, how many are employed. And that relies on people being at home. It relies on them telling the truth. So it's considered to be a less accurate measure. Nonetheless, it is a measure. Now, that household survey showed unemployment rising by 328,000. So a completely different number than what we're seeing from the corporate survey. Again, the corporate survey is considered to be more accurate, but you can't completely ignore this household survey. As a result of that rise in unemployment from the household survey, the jobless rate rose quite a bit to 3.7% from 3.5%. Do keep in mind, though, that 3.7% is a historically low level. But if you want to see that perhaps the red-hot jobs market is cooling, that's some evidence there.
Yeah, and I think Elon Musk may be pouring some water on the jobs market with what he's trying to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Watch those jobs in
Pouring some
California.
cold water there. So what would the Federal Reserve do, make with its numbers? How's the market reacting? How's the Fed likely to react in December?
This number is pretty much what the Fed thought was going to happen. I don't see any reason for this number to knock the Fed off course. When Jerome Powell spoke to us after that Fed meeting this week, he talked about perhaps cooling the rate of interest rate rises, perhaps coming off that 75 basis point increase. But he said that probably wouldn't happen it wouldn't happen at the December meeting. It might happen sometime after that. So I think that we're still probably in store for another big hike out of the Fed. That is a caveat there, though. We've got the CPI numbers out next Thursday. That will be a number that the Fed very much wants to see before committing itself.
Laurie, have a great weekend. It's nice speaking with you tonight.
You too,
All right, business analyst out of London. Thank you so much.